Reverend Jeremiah Wright is at it again, and this time he is targeting the Tea Party.
Got some unfinished business on the agenda, with one branch of the Tea Party being nothing but a 2.0 upgrade of the Lynch Party. We got some unfinished business on the agenda, with some folks doing everything they can to get that black man out of their White House.
Former Congressman Allen West joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Greta. How are you?
I'm very well. Well, what a way to celebrate Martin Luther King Day with Reverend Wright saying that calling the Tea Party a 2.0 upgrade of a Lynch party. Not exactly a uniting statement, but your thoughts about what he said.
No, it's definitely not a uniting statement. And when you consider also Reverend Barber and the heinous thing he said about Senator Tim Scott, calling him basically a ventriloquist dummy. What Reverend Wright needs to understand very simply, if he were to check his history, Jim Crow laws, the formulation of the Ku Klux Klan, poll taxes, literacy tests, all those came from the Democrat Party. So I think that when you are trying to castigate, as he is doing, the Tea Party, constitutional conservative grassroots movement, as being somewhat anti-black, that is not the case. They stand for freedom and liberty. They stand for fiscal responsibility, government operating within its right roles and responsibilities, free market system, and strong national defense. And I can understand why Reverend Wright would not want to agree with that. They're just trying to demonize the Tea Party because they understand the impact that that grassroots movement will have in these midterm elections.
Well, you know, I think the Tea Party, a bunch of big boys and big girls and everything. I think the thing that's so stunning to me is that he poisons Martin Luther King Day, which, you know, Martin Luther King Day doesn't just belong to African Americans in the country. There are an awful lot of Americans, and there were white Americans who admire him and recognize all he did. And, you know, let me just give you a contrast. I got Dr. Ben Carson, who's going to be joining us in a second, but this is what his tweet was, and what a contrast to Reverend Wright. He said on Martin Luther King Day, he tweeted, "As we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., let us pay more attention to the content of one's character than the color of one's skin." He has a completely different theme in trying to bring us together, whereas Reverend Wright just seems to be trying to be throwing gasoline on a fire.
Well, that's the difference between having an adult in the room and being part of the conversation and having a very immature child, which is exactly what Reverend Wright is. He's just trying to make himself relevant. He's just trying to get people to talk about him. Unfortunately, we're doing it once again, just like we did last week when he made the attack about Dr. King had dreams and President Obama has drones. So, again, this is someone that is off in the corner ranting and raving to get attention.
But, you know, you've got to at least point it out. I mean, when someone is trying so hard to do this, is because, you know, it's got to stop. I mean, there are groups around this country. We had the Chicago teachers last week who, for whatever reason, they thought that he was a good representative for them. Now we've got another group, you know, celebrating Martin Luther King. Look, unless we all try to find people who aren't trying to throw gasoline on the fire to try to really solve problems, you know, we're not going to, you know, we're not going to get any further, you know, if we don't do something to try to at least point out, you know, sort of the meanness of it or the motive of some of this.
No, you're absolutely right. He's not talking about the breakdown of the black family. He's not talking about the failure of education. He's not talking about school choice in the black community. He's definitely not talking about the dropout rates and incarceration rates.
All right, Congressman, let me bring you up to another topic then that's sort of along that theme. Is right now the number of Americans dependent on food stamps is skyrocketing. In 2013, a record 20% of households were on food stamps. Now, Congressman, is the increase in food stamps because we've identified people with greater need who are sort of left out, who needed the help, or is it because we have suddenly just gone haywire in terms of deciding, you know, how to sort of improve the economy for everybody and to lift people up?
Well, I think that we have to stop saying that the president's economic policies are failing, and we start looking at really what the trend is. We're seeing an incredible growth of the welfare nanny state. We're seeing the poverty rolls explode. We're seeing the food stamp rolls explode. We're seeing more dependency upon government largesse and programs. Look at what just happened with Target kicking part-time workers off of their health care insurance plans. We're seeing a desperation and a despondency out there that's being created by this administration, and it caused me to go go back and read about the Cloward-Piven strategy of Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, who were Columbia University professors. It just so happened that the president went to Columbia. And they talked about overloading the welfare system to a point where it would collapse. You would cause such chaos, and then you would have to move from a welfare system to almost a national income system. And when you think about this 11th extension of unemployment benefits, it's almost like the federal government is trying to pay people not to get out there and participate in the job market.
You know, when I look at these numbers, you know, first of all, I don't want anyone to be hungry. You know, and I'm willing to give food stamps to anybody who needs it. But I look at these numbers and I see that as a gross failure on the part of my generation in terms of how we make an environment for people who so can go out and work and take care of themselves. Because we have failed them on so many levels that this is where it is. That the best we can sort of do is to put food stamps out there. When that gives, you know, when that is not a, this is not a good sign to me. This is a sign of failure that the food stamps have gone up.
It is a sign of failure, but is it intentional failure? Now, you think about this. When you have a federal government that's using taxpayer dollars to advertise for people to go on food stamps, not just here in the United States of America, but they were also doing it south of the border in Mexico. So what message is that sending? Do we have a government, do we have an administration that is really trying to improve the quality of life and the standard of living for the American citizens, or they're just trying to get them more attached to government?
Well, it'd be nice if we could, while at the same time we're advertising benefits of food stamps for those who are truly hungry and need it, we're advertising more jobs, more opportunity. But I am not seeing those jobs and those opportunity to sort of equal that. All right, let me ask you about another question that's sort of near and dear to your heart. It's about the military. There's big news today at the Pentagon. The Pentagon announcing that it is relaxing its rules on the religious apparel and hairstyles that troops can wear while in uniform. That means some turbans, tattoos, body piercings, and facial hair will be permitted. Any religious items that pose a safety hazard, though, they will still be banned. Congressman, a good idea or not to relax these rules?
It's a horrible idea. It's part of the fundamental transformation of the United States of America and the social re-engineering of our military. Let me give you an interesting hypocrisy. Just during this last Christmas season, we had a gentleman by the name of Mikey Weinstein that brought a complaint about the dining facility in Guantanamo Bay because they had a nativity scene, and he wanted that nativity scene to be taken down. Now, all of a sudden, we're saying that everyone else can have their open expressions of their religion, when here's a guy that does not want us to say under God as part of the honor code oath of the United States Air Force Academy. We could have seen this coming when the ruling during the Nadal Hassan case was that he would be allowed to keep his beard. This, again, is a breakdown of the good order and discipline. I don't understand why the administration would take this on, but I believe that Chairman Joe Wilson, who is head of the subcommittee in the House on military personnel, should immediately call a hearing and start challenging this administration by making these unilateral decisions that are going to affect the military and its personnel. And eventually, it will affect its readiness. It's going to cause more complaints, more issues.
Well, far be it for me to suggest how the military should run its business, since I've never served in the military, but it seems to me that part of the idea of a uniform and part of the idea of a military is that everything be uniform so you can have sort of discipline. And I understand people's their interest and their desire to practice their religion or whatever, and I would certainly aggressively support that. But in that case, serve your nation perhaps in another way. Join the Peace Corps, do things there. But with things that, and of course I always fear that with every sort of change we're going to have 6 committees, which is just going to bog us down in more bureaucracy. But I so admire all the men and women who serve, and I certainly want to protect their rights to practice their religion. But the military is a very different organization than virtually any other, and there's so many ways to serve your country.
And remember, it's a voluntary military. You don't have to join. But they have standards, they have rules and regulations. You cannot be too short, you cannot be too fat, you cannot have flat feet. So those are the type of standards that we have that make us different and unique from the rest of civilian society.
And of course, sort of the irony was that when I was growing up and there was a draft, is that people actually got out of serving if they could establish they were conscientious objectors. We actually let people out for deep conviction, which is sort of an interesting twist in history.
Another hypocrisy indeed.
Well, I don't know if it's hypocrisy, but it's an interesting twist. I don't know. We'll debate that one another time. Congressman, always nice to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Jeff.